The Honourable Mark Pearson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Chair. I speak in opposition to the Enclosed Lands, Crimes and Lawful Enforcement Legislation Amendment Interference Bill 2016. It's rather ironic that only last week the government was giving an apology to the 78ers who were dealt with extremely severely for peaceful human rights protesting. 38 years ago, the government of the day gave a directive to the police, and I was one of those 78ers at the age of 19.
Oh, you're too young.
And it was clear that, and it's a very similar situation here, is that a group of people who wanted to oppose the laws of the day, which were extremely draconian, just like this bill is. It is one of the most draconian pieces of legislation that I've ever seen. And that is taking us back to the Bjelke-Petersen era of Queensland. And these people with, who walked the streets in 1978 wanted to oppose what was a legislation which would lock them up purely because of a strong point of view, of a strong state of a particular state of being and sexuality, and they were treated appallingly. And to the point where now, 38 years later, the government is apologising to them and acknowledging a respect for what they did and the changes they brought to society. It will not be very long before the same thing will happen about this bill if it becomes an act. In the 1970s and 80s, street marches already seemed to begin in King George Square in Brisbane City Hall. And the City Square was the crucible for the city's social disquiet and ferment, where thousands of protesters once risked the batons of the Premier John Bjelke-Petersen's police force over issues diverse as Vietnam War, the Springbok rugby tour, Aboriginal issues, nuclear disarmament and the right to protest. And following the Prime Minister Malcolm Fraser's decision in 1977 to expand uranium mining, an anti-uranium protest group was formed. In turn, the Premier Bjelke-Petersen outlawed street marches, sparking a number of confrontations in the city. However, the right to march quickly became the main issue for both the marchers and the police. On the 4th of September 1977, Bjelke-Petersen announced protest groups need not even bother applying for permits to stage marches or protests because they simply will not be granted. That is the government policy now, and there will not even be an appeal to a magistrate. It is striking the same chord of this bill, the same oppression, the same oppression of people's free will and capacity to speak up and oppose the instruments of harm. Now, and then what happened in the Fitzgerald inquiry, and this is probably exactly what will happen in this situation as well, there will be an inquiry into the consequences of this bill. And during the Fitzgerald inquiry, Terry O'Gorman, representing the Queensland Council of Civil Liberties, took up the issue of the anti-march laws. And the right of public assembly had traditionally been regarded as analogous to the right of free speech and a touchstone of the respect given to civil liberties within society. But what I will speak to here is also how this bill is going to have an impact upon the conduct of other businesses, and that certainly comes to the subject of which I've been elected to this Parliament for, are the businesses which use animals. And what the whole issue of the reasons why people are protesting in this way or opposing coal seam gas operations or other mining operations is the same. It's for the same purpose and foundation as to why activists go into a position of opposing other conducts of business. These are businesses which harm. They harm the environment, they harm the people living in the area, they harm the air, the water, and in the situation for the animal rights movement, they harm animals. So yes, activists go into intensive livestock industry operations or abattoirs and have been known to lock down when all of the other avenues have been exhausted to try and bring change for the animals. It's not as if it's a flippant, reckless conduct. All the avenues that are open to people are pursued to finality, and that out of utter frustration, when there is no change to stop the harm, be it of whatever nature, then people are compelled to move into that position, risk their personal liberties, and this has been an instrument of protest for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and it's been about women, children, and workers, labour, slaves has been referred to. We cannot strike this fundamental principle of protecting people and the environment from harm. So this is a perfect example of where we are wanting to stop sows from being kept in stalls where they can't turn around, they can only step one step forward or backwards for almost their entire lives. Hens in cages that are living their whole life on 2/3 of the size of an A4 sheet of paper. And the gas stunning of pigs, a protest recently where activists actually stopped animals from being delivered to gas chambers where it took them up to 1 minute to die from asphyxiation because of the gassing mechanisms. And this is done out of frustration because harm is happening and all of the interventions and avenues have been exhausted by the people who've been trying to bring help and bring change and to prevent harm. And now what the problem the government faces here is that one of the most extraordinary historical situations has occurred where activist is standing beside people working in the local town, beside farmers. This is where there is an alliance that has not happened before, very rarely happened before in Australia. So because of all those reasons, the Animal Justice Party only naturally must oppose and condemn this bill. Thank you.